Hi everyone, and a very warm welcome to all our viewers. And in this particular video, we are going to discuss the PostgreSQL interview questions. So, guys, if you're working in IT, it is very important to have good understanding of databases. So now every application in the IT industry, it has a front end, back end, and a database. So it doesn't matter what your profile is in the IT industry, whether you're a developer, you're a tester, or you're any sort of admin, it is very good to have SQL knowledge. And guys, PostgreSQL is one of the most popular databases out there. Like apart from PostgreSQL, we also have MySQL, SQLite, Microsoft SQL Server, and so on and so forth. But in this particular video, we are going to cover the most frequently asked PostgreSQL interview questions. So guys, in this particular video, we have covered a few questions, and all of the questions that we will be covering in this video are divided into three categories. The first category is for the beginners or the freshers. The second category is for the intermediate people, like those people who have at least 2 to 3 years of experience in the IT industry. And the third category of questions is for the advanced folks, like those folks who have at least 5 to 6 years of experience in the IT industry. Okay, so this is the whole agenda for this particular video. And before moving ahead, I want you guys to subscribe to MindMajix YouTube channel and also hit that bell icon so that you never miss an update from us. So without any further delay, let's get started with our first category of questions. That is the questions which are meant for the freshers or the beginners. So let's start with our first question. And the first basic question and a very obvious question is, what is PostgreSQL? So guys, PostgreSQL is a freeware object relational database management system, or ORDBMS. It is also called as Postgres, and it is one of the most popular and a widely utilized object relational database management systems. So guys, there can be several types of databases, like you have hierarchical databases, network databases, object-oriented relational, cloud-based database, centralized database, operational database, and NoSQL database. So this particular PostgreSQL is a object relational database management system. So it is a strong database management system that offers substantial and additional power by integrating fundamental concepts so that all of the users can extend the database, or they can utilize the database in a proper and efficient way and without any errors or without any problems. The next question is, what are the primary applications of PostgreSQL? So guys, unlike any other databases, there are a few applications of PostgreSQL. So like PostgreSQL enables you to create, update, and delete the tables in the databases. Like you can perform all the CRUD operations with tables in the database. Apart from that, you can also manipulate, modify, and access the data in a table. Next, what you can do is you can summarize and retrieve the required information from a single table or multiple tables as well. And last but not the least, so guys, this is the very basic question, and all of these applications or all of the tasks that you can do with the help of Postgres is mentioned in this particular question. So now let us move ahead to the third question. So what are the benefits of PostgreSQL? Like why you should use PostgreSQL? So guys, there are several benefits of PostgreSQL, like it offers excellent scalability and performance. Performance wise, it is a very good database. And also, depending upon the application that you're using, you can easily scale with the help of PostgreSQL. Apart from this, it efficiently manages massive amounts of data and parallel connections. Next, it provides various advanced features, like with PostgreSQL, you have support for complex data types, geospatial data, or full on text search with PostgreSQL. Next, as we have already seen, PostgreSQL is highly scalable. It means it enables us or the developers to create the custom data types, procedural languages, and functions as well. And last but not the least, it supports data integrity, reliability, and ACID properties. So, guys, I hope you must be knowing about ACID properties. Like ACID stands for atomicity, consistency, isolation, and duration. So, these were some of the benefits of using PostgreSQL database. The next question is, what are the important features of PostgreSQL? So now if you talk about the features of this particular database, so this PostgreSQL is endorsed by all of the major operating systems out there. So it doesn't matter whether you are using a Windows operating system, a Linux based operating system, or even a Mac OS. The next feature is that PostgreSQL is an object relational database. Basically, it is a combination of object oriented database and relational database. That is why it is called as object relational database or ORDBMS. Apart from that, it also supports procedural languages and multi-version concurrency control. So we will be seeing these features in the upcoming questions as well, like what is MVCC and so on. And last but not the least, PostgreSQL also includes nested transactions. So what is a transaction? We will be seeing in the upcoming questions. And like in every database, you have nested queries as well. So similarly, like nested queries, you also have nested transactions. So these were some of the important features of PostgreSQL. The next question is, how do we install PostgreSQL? So guys, in this particular question, the interviewer obviously will not give you a laptop or a system or a PC and he will ask you to download the PostgreSQL. The interviewer just wants to know what are the basic or the some of the steps that are used in installing PostgreSQL. So there are a few steps. Like in the first step, you have to go to the official PostgreSQL website. Always download any application or any database or any language, programming language from the official website only. And based on the operating system, you have to select the version of the database. Next, execute the installer and follow on-screen instructions. Over here, we may have to specify the installation directory and give a password for the database super user. The third step is you have to choose all of the components that you have to install, like PostgreSQL Server, the graphical interface or the GUI, and the command line tools. So this totally depends on the user. Like you can decide what are the components that you want. And similarly, once you check the components, you can install them. Next, in the fourth step, you finish the installation process. And once the installation process has been finished, you can verify that whether the PostgreSQL database has been correctly installed on your system. Alternatively, you can configure the additional settings like memory allocation or network access as per your requirements. So guys, apart from this installation, the interviewer might also ask you like which is the latest version of PostgreSQL as of now. So currently PostgreSQL 17 was released on September 26, 2024. So this is the latest version and you must always upgrade to the latest version because with latest version you also get significant performance enhancement and new features as well. The next question is, what is a schema? So guys, this particular question is not related just to PostgreSQL. Like for any SQL database, this question is valid. So what is a schema? So in PostgreSQL, a schema contains tables with views, data types, indexes, constraints, functions, and sequences. The next question is, define a constraint in PostgreSQL. So guys, a constraint is nothing but a group of conditions that define the kind of data that acts as input to every column of the table. So constraints will be used for assuring the data integrity in the table and to avoid the unnecessary actions as well. The next question is, define a join in PostgreSQL. So guys, this is a very basic and a very important question in any database or SQL based interview. Now, in this particular question, we have to define what is a join. So joins are used for combining and retrieving the records from two or more tables. So PostgreSQL utilizes SQL joins for performing these types of operations. So furthermore, the interviewer can also ask you what are the different kinds of joins. So you can tell them what are the different types of joins like inner join, right join, left join, full join. So you can just specify the definitions and it is very much easy to explain the types of joins using Venn diagrams. I hope everyone in their high school, you know the concept of Venn diagrams. So with the help of Venn diagrams, you can easily explain all of the four types of joins. So the next question is, what is a primary key? So the primary key is the column or a group of columns that uniquely identifies every row in the table. So it assures the integrity and the uniqueness of the data in the table. So the primary key constant follows two rules. So the two rules are the value of the primary key columns should be unique, and the second one is the primary key columns must not include null values. So for defining the primary key in the database or PostgreSQL, we can utilize the primary key constant while creating or altering the table for adding that particular constant. So it is very important to note that we can define only one primary key per table. So based on the previous question, the next question is, what is a foreign key? So foreign key is a group of column or a column that sets up the link between the two tables. So basically it depicts the relationship between the reference table, which is also the parent table, and the referencing table, which is nothing but the child table. So the foreign key assures the referential integrity by following two rules. So in primary key also we had two rules, and in foreign key also we have two rules. The first one is the values in the foreign key columns should be available in the primary key or the unique key constant of the reference table. And the second rule is deletions or updates in the reference table are controlled for maintaining the consistency of the referencing table. So basically for defining the foreign key, we can utilize the foreign key constraint while altering the table or while creating the table for adding the constraint. The foreign key columns in referencing table should have the same data type as the primary key column in the referenced table. So guys, I hope the concept of primary key and foreign key is very much clear. Apart from this, the interviewer can also ask you, explain the basic difference between primary key and foreign key. So in short and sweet sentences, you can explain like a primary key enables only a unique value and non-null values, whereas a foreign key offers shared keys between two or more tables. So this is the basic difference between primary key and foreign key. The next question is, can we run PostgreSQL on the cloud? So the answer to this question is yes, we can run PostgreSQL on all of the famous cloud providers like AWS or Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud Platform or GCP, and Microsoft Azure. The next question is, what is a view? So the view depicts the query result to one or multiple inherent tables. So views are basically used to simplify the difficult queries, as these queries are defined once in the view and they can be directly queried. The next question is, explain normalization. So in any database, not only PostgreSQL, but in any database, normalization is a mechanism through which we can create or modify the databases and the tables for handling the inefficiencies related to data storage, query processing, or data modification. So in simple words, normalization includes multiple steps for reducing data complexity and redundancy. So guys, in this particular question, the interviewer might also ask you about what are the different types of normalization, like you have 1NF, 2NF, 3NF, and so on. So if the interviewer asks you these kind of questions, you must also be able to explain these concepts. The next question is, what is a transaction in a database? So a transaction is basically a sequence of database operations that are considered as a single logical unit. Basically, it assures the atomicity, isolation, durability, and consistency properties, basically the ACID properties of a group of associated database. So transaction enables multiple database operations to be implemented together. If any part of the transaction fails, all of the modifications within the transactions can be rolled back, and thereby you can maintain the integrity of the data. And now the interviewer might also ask you, how do you handle transactions in PostgreSQL? So basically transactions can be handled internally through the auto commit mode, where every statement is considered as a separate transaction, or internally through the begin, rollback, and commit statements for defining the transaction boundaries. The next question is, what is PL Python? So basically PL Python is a procedural language to which PostgreSQL provides support. The next question is, what purpose does pgadmin in the PostgreSQL server have? So the PG admin in PostgreSQL is a data administration tool. Like for every database in the IT industry, like any SQL based database, you have a database admin. So basically, the database admin uses a tool called PG admin. So it serves the purpose of retrieving, developing, testing, and maintaining the databases. So all of the activities related to the databases, like apart from developers, so the admin performs the tasks related to maintaining the database. The next question is, how can we add new values to a particular table? So guys, this particular question talks about, like, the interviewer might ask you some of the basic queries related to database. Like in this particular question, the interviewer is asking you, how can we add new values to a particular table? So basically, in any of the SQL based database, there's a very important statement like insert into, and using this insert into statement, you can add data to the SQL table. Similarly, the interviewer might also ask you, like, how do you create a new database? Like before creating a table, you need to create a database. So you can create a database using a create database, which is an SQL command. And apart from SQL command, you can also utilize the GUI interface. So there are two methodologies over here. Like there are two ways. Once you have the GUI access and you also have the command line access. So using both of the methods, you can create a database and you can create tables, so on and so forth. Apart from that, the interviewer might also ask you, how do you delete a database? So basically, you delete a database using drop database or drop DB statements. Similarly, the interviewer might also ask you, like, how do we select, like if there's a particular table and you have to select n number of records from that particular table. So let's say you have a table called employees and you have to select top 5 records from that table. So what you can do is select star from employees limit 5. So using this limit 5, you can select top 5 statements of a table or the top 5 records of a table. The next question is, how can we create a backup of the database in PostgreSQL? So creating a backup of your database in PostgreSQL is a very simple task. So there are several methods for performing a backup. Like you have the online backup technique, you also have SQL dumps, and you also have file system level backup. So using any one of the three techniques, you can perform a backup or you can create a backup of the database in PostgreSQL. Next, very important question is, how can we enhance the query performance in the PostgreSQL? So guys, there are a few strategies through which you can enhance the query performance. Like firstly, you can perform indexing, and indexing is very helpful in queries that include the where clause or the where statement. Next, you can enhance the query performance of the database by performing the partitioning for large tables. So basically, what is partitioning? So in partitioning, what you do is you divide a large table into smaller tables. So it is very easy to deal with smaller table than dealing with one large table. So multiple smaller tables are easy to handle, and that is the reason you perform partitioning. The third technique is you can develop SQL statements for reducing the processing overhead. Like for example, by preventing the unrequired columns in the select statements. So whatever columns that you provide in the select statement, that can be limited, and once you have the limited number of columns in select statement, you automatically enhance the query performance. And last but not the least, what you can do is you can maximize the memory utilization by tuning the server parameters for matching the hardware specifications. The next question is, how can we handle errors in PostgreSQL? So guys, in PostgreSQL, there are two ways through which you can handle the errors. So the first way is by using callback functions. So callback functions can be used for handling the errors and warning conditions. So while using callback functions, we can define a particular behavior in case of warnings and errors in the queries through the whenever method. And the second technique is detailed information about the warning or the error can be achieved from the SQL variable. So basically, SQL variable offers in-depth information while warnings and errors arise during the query execution. So guys, with this, we have covered the beginners level questions or the questions that are meant for freshers. After this, we are going to cover the questions that are meant for the experienced or the intermediate candidates. So guys, till question number 20, we have covered the questions that were meant for beginners or the fresher candidates. Now, question number 21 onwards till question number 40, we will be covering a set of questions that are meant for the experienced candidates, like those folks who have at least 2 to 3 years of experience with PostgreSQL. So the next question over here is describe triggers. So now in the previous we have seen how can we handle the errors in PostgreSQL. And in that particular question, there was one technique that mentions the use of callback functions. So basically, triggers, which are also known as callback functions, these are the specifications that a database must automatically implement whenever a particular kind of operation has been carried out. So what do you mean by that? So we normally define triggers for executing either before or after the insert, update, or delete operation. And that too, that can be done like either once per SQL statement or once per the modified row. So what happens is if the trigger event happens, the trigger function is invoked at the proper time for handling that particular kind of event. And now you must be wondering, why do we need to use triggers? So triggers allow you to ensure that the data integrity is preserved while modifying the database. So this was a short and crisp definition of trigger. The next question over here is explain multi-version concurrency control or MVCC. So guys, multi-version concurrency control or MVCC is an advanced technique of PostgreSQL. So with this particular feature, you can improve the database performance in case of the multi-user scenarios. So this indicates that when we query the database, every transaction views a snapshot of the database since it was some time ago, irrespective of the state of the inherent data. And now, what is the use of this particular feature? So this particular feature secures the transaction from seeing the inconsistent data that concurrent transaction updates on the similar data rows that can be induced. The next question is, what are the different logging mechanisms available in PostgreSQL and what is their purpose? So basically, PostgreSQL provides different kinds of logging mechanisms, such as error logs to capture the errors and warnings, query logs to record the executed queries for performance analysis and debugging. And apart from this, you also have connection logs, and these logs can be used to track the connection attempts and disconnections to the database. The next question is, explain the difference between inner join and left join with example. So guys, in the previous questions, we have already seen what is join and what are the different kinds of join. But in this particular question, the interviewer wants you to explain inner join and left join along with examples. So what do you mean by examples? So you can mention queries as well over here. So as we have already seen in the previous questions, inner join is that particular join that returns only rows that have matching values in both the tables. Whereas a left join returns all the rows from the left table and the matching rows from the right table with nulls for non-matching row. So once you explain the definition again in this particular question, what you can do is you can give queries as well as examples. So over here, as you can see on the screen, the first query is that of an inner join. So how do you write an inner join? So inner join is written as select star from employees, which is your table, inner join departments on employees.department ID is equal to departments ID. So over here you can clearly see we are using inner join on employees table, and from that particular table we are matching the department IDs. And the second query is that of a left join. So select star from employees left join departments on employees.departments ID and equal to departments.id. So I hope this clearly explains the difference between inner join and left join. The next question is, again, write a SQL query to find the total number of employees in each of the departments. So in this particular question, what you can do is you can mention the use of count function to aggregate the employee counts, and you can also specify the group by clause to group the results by department. And Here, we also need to highlight the importance of selecting the department column and the count of employees. So how do you write that query? So this is a very simple query, and this query can be written as select department ID, count star from employees, and group by department ID. So as you can see over here, we are selecting the column of department ID, and once we select that column, we are finding all of the employees from that particular department ID. So that is why we have written count star from employees and group by department ID. So once we write this query, it will clearly fetch us the results that will tell us the total number of employees in each department. The next question is, what are indexes in PostgreSQL and how do they improve the query performance? So guys, basically indexing is a very popular technique in any of the SQL based database like Postgres and all other databases. So what are indexes? So indexes are nothing but they are special database objects that enhance or improve the speed of data retrieval operations, and that is done by creating a data structure that allows for fastest searches. So the search results are improved significantly once you use the indexes. So just to give you an example, in if you're reading a book, so at the beginning of the book also you have index. So how do you use that index? Whatever page that you want to read, and the topic that you want to read is defined on that particular page number in the index. So with the help of index, you can easily navigate through the book. So similarly, in the database as well, indexing will help you for faster search. So they significantly improve the query performance by reducing the amount of data that needs to be scanned, although they can also introduce some overhead during the write operation. The next question is, write an SQL query to update the salary of an employee with a specific ID. So guys, now if you're an experienced or an intermediate candidate, you will be asked a lot of queries in the actual interview as well. So over here, what we need to do, we need to write a query to update the salary of an employee with a specific ID. So how do you do that? As you can clearly see, so here you have to mention the use of update statement to modify the existing records, and you have to use the set clause to update the column. And you must also mention the importance of where clause. And what is the use of where clause? We use the where clause over here to target the specific employee ID. For example, as you can see over here, the query will be update employees, which is our table, and we are using set clause, set salary. Salary can be any number or a number that you want to update for that particular employee. So over here we have written salary equal to 80,000, where ID equal to 123. So what this query will do, so this query is going to update the employees table, and we are updating the salary of an employee whose employee ID is 123. The next question is, explain the use of group by clause with an example. So over here, what you need to do is you need to first define the group by clause. Like, why do you use the group by clause? Like, group by clause is a way to aggregate the data based on one or more columns. And you must also mention that it is often used with aggregate functions like count, sum, or average. And once you provide the definition, you can also write an example, or you can also give an example over here. Like, the group by clause is used to aggregate the data based on one or more columns, and group by is particularly used along with aggregate functions like count, sum, or average. And to provide an example, what you can do is you can write a query like over here. As you can see, first we have written select department ID and the average salary from employees table, and all of those employees are grouped by department ID. So what this query will do, it will select department ID and average salary from the employees table, and all of those employees will be grouped by department ID. So department wise, you can see all of the different employees and their average salary by this particular query. The next question is, what are subqueries and how they can be used in PostgreSQL? So guys, subqueries are nothing but nested queries, like one query inside another query, which can be in the select, from, or where clause. So basically they are used to perform complex queries in a modular way. So subqueries can also be used to filter the data, compute the aggregate values, or even generate temporary results that can be joined with other tables as well. The next question is, write an SQL query to find the second highest salary from the employees table. So guys, this is another very popular and most frequently asked question in the actual interviews. So over here, if we have to find the second highest salary from an employees table, so it is obvious that you have to use the order by clause. And what is the use of order by clause? We have to first sort the salaries in the descending order. So once we do that, we have to use the limit clause as well to restrict the number of rows that can be returned. And once you do that, you have to highlight the use of subquery to find the second highest salary. So as you can see over here, to find the second highest salary from the employees table, first you have to rank the salaries in descending order, and then second the second highest value. So what will your query look like? So as you can see over here, you have to select max salary from employees. So in this particular section, you have selecting the maximum salary from the employees, where now this is the clause that you have to use, like you have to use this condition where salary is less than, and then you have the nested query. So the nested query is select max salary from employees. So first the nested query will be executed like first you will get results like select max salary from employees. This will select the highest salary. And then by using the less than sign, you are again using select max salary from employees where salary is less than the highest salary. So this automatically will give you the second highest salary. The next question is, write an SQL query to list all of the employees who joined in the last year. Answer this query, what you have to do is you have to mention the use of select statement, and with the help of select statement, what you will do is you have to retrieve all the employee records. So once you do that, you have to specify the use of where clause to filter the records based on the joining date. And after this, what you have to do is you have to explain the importance of date functions like now and interval to calculate the exact year. So over here you can see our query will look like select star from employees, which is our table, where, which is our condition, join date is greater than or equal to now, which is the current date, and till what duration? Interval is 1 year, like the previous 1 year. So from current date till last 1 year, you will get all of the employees that have joined. So based on joining date, you can filter all of the records from the employee tables. So it's very important to remember now function and interval in this particular query. The next question is, write an SQL query to create a view that shows the average salary by department. So in this particular query, to create a view that shows the average salary by department, what you can do is you can use the create view statement along with select query that includes average function and a group by clause. So what will our query look like? So our query will look like create view average salary by department as select department ID, average salary from employees, and group by department ID. So basically first you must understand that we are basically writing a select query, and before that select query we are creating a view. And what will that view look like? The view will look like average salary by department. So over here, select department ID and average salary, which is an aggregate function. We are selecting these two columns from employees table, and we are grouping them by department ID. So department wise ID, you are getting average salary, like you are getting this employees and their average salary with respect to department. And once you get those results, using those results, we are creating a view, and that view is called as average salary by department. The next question over here is, write an SQL query to find all the employees whose names start with the letter A. So guys, to find all of the employees whose names start with the letter A, what you can do is you can use the select statement and a where clause, like you can specify the condition using where clause. And apart from where clause, what you have to do, you have to use the like operator. So what will your query look like? Your query will look like select star from employees table, like employees is the table name, where you're specifying the condition, where name is another column from the employees table, like is the an operator, and in single quotes you have to provide capital A and the percentage sign. So what does that percentage sign means? That Only we are interested in the starting letter, which is the capital A, and after that, whatever comes, it doesn't matter to us. So because we just have to find the employees whose names start with the letter A. So apart from this, if it would have been like find the list of employees whose name ends with A, so what would have been the query? So instead of A and percentage sign, what change we might have done? We just have written percentage sign and then capital A or small a. Okay. So this query will find all of the employees whose names will start with the letter A. The next question is write an SQL query to perform the full text search on a documents table. So guys, with PostgreSQL, full text search feature is used to perform the complex search on a text stored in the database. And for this particular query, what you have to do is you have to use TS vector and TS query data types for full text searches. And apart from that, you also have to use the match operator, which is 2 times at the rate, to check if the documents match the query. So to perform a full text search on a documents table, the query will look like select star from documents. This is our table name documents where, and as I've told, we are using two data types over here, which is TS vector and TS query. So select star from documents where the condition is the data type to TS vector, which is the content, like the content that you are providing over here with TS vector. And then we have the match operator using 2 times at the rate. And then after that, we have to TS query the search term. The next question is, what are the common performance tuning techniques in PostgreSQL? So guys, the most common or frequently used performance tuning techniques in PostgreSQL include indexing. Now, as we have already seen, what is the use of indexing? We use indexing to speed up the data retrieval, and we also use query optimization tools like explain, analyze to identify and address the slower queries. So regular database maintenance tasks such as vacuuming and analyzing also helps to maintain the optimal performance of the databases. The next question is explain the difference between a view and a materialized view in PostgreSQL. So guys, in this particular question, we have to define what is a view as a virtual table that dynamically retrieves the data from the underlying table. So this is a clear-cut definition of view, and once you do that, you have to explain what is a materialized view. So materialized view basically stores all of the result sets of a query physically, and this allows faster access, but it also requires manual refreshes. So once you have mentioned the definition of view and materialized view, you can also explain the difference, and which is the core thing of this question. So you can say that views are suitable for real-time data, whereas materialized views are ideal for performance optimization in the read-heavy scenarios. Now, what do you mean by read-heavy scenarios? So there can be scenarios where you have to read a lot of data from the tables or the database. So at that particular time, what you can do is you can make use of materialized views. The next question is, what are the stored procedures and how can you create one in Postgres? So guys, to answer this question, first you have to define the stored procedures. So what are stored procedures? So they are nothing but reusable SQL code blocks that perform a specific task. And once you define the stored procedure, you can mention that how they are created. So basically, stored procedures are created using the create procedure statement. And for creating a stored procedure, you have to define the procedure name, parameters, and the SQL code block to encapsulate the logic that you're trying to implement. So basically, we are using the stored procedure to implement or use a particular logic on the database. The next question is, what are functions in Postgres and how they can be used to extend the SQL functionality? So basically, functions in Postgres are reusable SQL or PL/PGSQL code blocks that encapsulate the logic for various tasks, and those tasks can be calculations, data manipulation, and the use of complex queries or nested queries as well. So they can also extend the SQL functionality by providing the complex or the custom operations, returning values or set of rows, and functions also enhance the modularity and the code reuse in Postgres. The next question is, explain the concept of replication in PostgreSQL and its benefits for the data availability. So guys, replication in Postgres involves copying data from one database server, which can be a master, to one or more standby servers, and they are also known as slaves. So the data transfer or the data copy can be synchronous or asynchronous depending upon the situation. Now, why do you copy data from one server to other server? So basically, this is done to improve the data availability, load balancing, and disaster recovery. For example, you don't want any of the servers to have a single point of failure. For example, if the master server that holds all of the database and the data, so if that particular server fails or crashes due to any reason, you always have backup in case of standby servers or slaves. So if the master fails, you have slaves or other standby servers as backup. So that is why you replicate the data on multiple servers in any databases. The next question is, what are some of the best practices for designing and maintaining a PostgreSQL database? So guys, for optimal design and maintenance of a Postgres database, there are various techniques or practices that you can follow. For example, you can normalize the data to reduce the data redundancy, and you can use appropriate data types and apply indexes strategically to enhance the query performance. So we have already seen these techniques in the previous questions as well. So apart from that, what you can do is you can regularly back up your data and monitor the performance, and you monitor the performance to identify the bottlenecks. So these were some of the best practices for designing and maintaining a PostgreSQL database. After this, we are going to cover the questions that are meant for the experienced candidates. So guys, finally we have come to the end portion of this video wherein we will be covering the questions that are meant for the more experienced candidates, like those candidates who have at least 3 to 5 years of experience with Postgres. Okay, so in this particular portion of the video, we will be covering roughly 20 questions. So this question says, let's say we have a table representing the vacations booking. Okay, so there's a table called as vacations booking. And from that table, what we have to do, we have to write a query that returns the columns representing the total number of bookings in the last 90 days, last 365 days, and the overall number of bookings. So guys, as you can see on the screen, there are two columns over here. The first column, or the column on the left hand side, this is the input that we have. Like this is the column and this is the data type over here. So here in this table, vacations booking table, we have reservation ID, guest ID, check-in date, and checkout date. So these are the four columns that are provided as input. And the right hand side column, or the second column over here is, or the second table that we have is the output table. Like we want the output in this particular format. So over here also we have columns like number of bookings ID in the last 90 days, number of bookings in the last 365 days, and the number of bookings which is total. And the data type over here is integer. Okay, so I hope you guys have understood the question. So for the advanced candidates, it will be mostly, a query, advanced queries or advanced scenario based questions. So for this particular question, what you can do is you can pause the video for a while. You can take a piece of paper and a pen and write down your possible answer over here. Okay. So once you write the possible answer over here, you can match it with the answer that we will be just discussing. To answer this query, what you have to do is, as you can see on the screen, first, let's suppose that there are two cases over here. And what are those two cases? In the first case, we are finding the total number of bookings in the last 90 days. So let's suppose the current date is 1st December 2024. So as you can see on the screen, the by default date format for Postgres is year, month, and the day. So this is the first case, last 90 days. And the second case is last 365 days. And thirdly, we will be having a count of the overall or the total number of bookings that are available in this particular table. So our query will look like something select. Obviously, we will be starting with select, and then we have to use a aggregate function sum. So what we are including in the first case? So in the first case, we are using the aggregate function sum, and we're defining the case when date add or the check-in date is the check-in date, that is our first column, and the interval. The interval over here is the 3 month. So that's why we have written interval 3 month, and which is greater than or equal to the date, like today's date. If it is in the specified date, then the value is 1, else it is 0. And then we are ending the case over here. And what do you want to name this aggregate function? We want to name it as num bookings last 90 days. So this is our first case. Similarly, the second case is when the check-in date is, we are defining again the interval, which is 1 year, greater than equal to the current date. And if it is true, then 1. If it is false, then 0. So this is how we are representing our case in case of 1 year interval. And you want to name it as num bookings last 365 days. So this is our second case. And the third part of this query is we also want to count the overall or the total number of bookings. So that is why we are mentioning over here count reservation IDs, like total number of reservation IDs, as num bookings total. And we are extracting all of this from the bookings table. So I hope you have understood this query. And now let's move forward for the next question. So the next question is again a scenario based question. And in this particular question, you have to provide a data analytics solution. So now what is the question over here? So let's say you work for an e-commerce website or an e-commerce company that receives the clickstream data from Kafka daily. So you're asked to design a data analytics solution for storing and querying the raw data with a 2-year retention period. The current data volume is around 600 million events daily. And what kind of data analytics solution would you design keeping the cost in mind? So guys, this is a very advanced question. Like if you're working for an e-commerce company, or if you have worked on these kind of scenarios before, like if you have truly gained a valuable hands-on experience in dealing with this kind of scenarios, I think you will be surely able to answer these kind of questions. So over here, let's break down this question is into few parts. So here we are receiving clickstream data from Kafka, Apache Kafka. So Apache Kafka is basically used for streaming data. And as a consultant, what you have to do, you have to provide a data analytics solution for storing and querying the raw data with a retention period of 2 years. And the current data volume is around 600 million events daily. So what kind of solution would you design keeping the cost in mind? So here we have to consider a very important parameter, that is the cost. So depending on this particular question, so what you would answer, like how you would answer this question. So you would answer it like, to design a cost effective data solution, what you can do is for storing and querying large volumes of clickstream data, like you can use a combination of Apache Kafka, which is the streaming platform, and for storing and analyzing this data, what you can do is you can use Apache Hadoop as well. So combination of Apache Kafka and Apache Hadoop might work in this particular scenario. Or you can also do is you can use a cloud-based solution. Like if you're using, let's say, AWS cloud platform. So in AWS, you have Amazon S3 for long-term storage. Like if you're using servers, then Kafka and Hadoop would do the job for you. But if you're using a cloud-based solution, like if you have your, the infrastructure is on the cloud. So in that case, if you're using AWS, so you can use Amazon or AWS S3. So PostgreSQL can be used for querying and the data analytics. And now what is the purpose of using Postgres over here? So using Postgres, you can leverage the columnar storage for efficiently querying the data. And implementing data partitioning with Postgres, you can do it based on the date or the user ID. And once you partition the data, what you can achieve is you can optimize the performance of the database. And since we have the condition of 2-year retention period, so what you can do is to satisfy that condition, you can regularly compress and archive the older data to manage the storage cost. So if you're able to compress and archive the older data, you will significantly reduce the cost of your data analytics solution. So this was the best possible answer for this kind of scenario based question. The next question is, describe the different types of user accounts and access control mechanisms in Postgres. So guys, in Postgres, roles can represent the users or the groups that are assigned privileges for database objects. That user roles can log in while group roles manage privileges collectively. So those privileges are select, insert, and update control access. Roles can inherit the privileges from other roles as well. And here the authentication methods such as passwords, GSS API, SSPI, LDAP, and certificates are also present. Apart from that, row level security or RLS allows fine grained access control by restricting which rows a user can access to. So these are the certain mechanisms that ensure secure and controlled database access. The next question is, explain how would you migrate data from one database system to Postgres. So guys, this is again a real-time scenario based question. Like if you're working for a company, so let's say you have your database systems on a different SQL based database like MySQL or Oracle or some other database, and now you're planning to migrate all of your data from that system to Postgres. So how would you do that? So to migrate data from one database to Postgres, the first and foremost thing what you have to do is you have to export the source database schema and the data. So schema and the data is very much important. Like this is the primary criteria that you must satisfy in order to migrate to Postgres. So after that, what you have to do, you have to use tools like pgdump for Postgres or other such relevant or equivalent tools for other databases as well. After that, what you have to do is you have to create the schema in Postgres using the exported SQL script and then import the data. Next, what you can do is you can use tools like pgadmin, PSQL, or any third party ETL tools that can facilitate this process efficiently. And last but not the least, the final step over here is you have to verify the data integrity once the migration has been completed. The next question is, how can you stop a Postgres SQL server? Like, can you stop a particular database in the Postgres SQL cluster? So to answer this question, if you are using a Windows based system, so the command for Windows based system is, as you can see on the screen, the command is pg_ctl and then space -d and then the path of the database directory that is present on your system. So the first step over here would be to locate the PostgreSQL database directory. And once you have the path of the directory, the command is pgctl space -D and then the path and lastly space stop. So this is for Windows based systems. If you are using Linux based system, the command is very simple. You have to just type sudo space service space PostgreSQL space stop. And last but not the least, if you're using a Mac based system or a Mac OS, then the command is pgctl-d. Similar to Windows, you also have to find the location or the directory of the Postgres, and that path you have to type here like user local var Postgres and then finally space and stop. So based on the system that you're using, these are the techniques to stop a PostgreSQL server. And to answer the second part of the question, like can you stop a particular database in the PostgreSQL cluster? So the answer to this question is no. PostgreSQL does not allow the user to stop a specific data in the cluster. The next question is, why is it a standard practice to explicitly put foreign key constraints on related tables instead of creating a normal big int field? So when considering foreign key constraints, when you should consider a cascade delete or a set null? So guys, using foreign key constraints in Postgres. Now, why do you use the foreign key constraint in a Postgres database? So this ensures the data integrity by enforcing the relationships between the tables. Also, it prevents often records and maintains consistency across the related tables that are present in the database. And foreign keys also enable cascading actions. And here what you can do is you can use cascade delete when you want related records to be automatically removed when the parent record is deleted, and set null is used when you want to retain related records but nullify the foreign key value. So guys, the next question is again a scenario based question. So the question says, let's say that you work for an advertising firm. So over here you have a table of users impressions of ad campaigns over time, and each impression ID consists of the values of user engagement specified as excited, okay, or bored. So over here, what you have to do is you have to write a query to find all of the users that are currently excited and have never been bored with a campaign. So as you can see on the screen, the first column over here, or the first table over here, is that of a input. So this is the input that you have been provided with. So there are 4 columns. The first one is user ID. The second is DT, or the date. The third column is the campaign ID, and the fourth column is the impression ID. So this is the input that we have. And along with columns, you also have the data types over here. And the output is the second table. Like, the output of this query should look like the first column will be user ID. There's only one column over here, and the data type of that particular user ID is integer. So how will you write this particular query? So guys, as you can see on the screen, firstly, you can pause this video, you can write your query, and once you have written the query, you can match it with the query that you can see on the screen right now. So our query will look like select distinct user ID. And once you have the distinct user ID, from where you have to fetch these IDs from add impressions, which is our input table. So select distinct user ID from add impressions. And now to specify the conditions, like we want the condition as excited and never been bored. So using where we can specify these two conditions. So where impression ID equal to excited and user ID not in. So for those users who have never been bored with a campaign, we are specifying that using and user ID not in. And inside not in, again, we are writing one query, which is a nested query. So select user ID from add impressions where impression ID is bored. So once you have all of those results, then you are negating those results using not in. So I hope you have understood this particular query. And now let's move to the next question. How to handle exceptions in PLPG So basically, exceptions are those particular situations or conditions where you have to provide proper explanation or proper messages to the user so that they should understand if they are doing anything wrong or if they are unknowingly doing a mistake. So in that particular case, you have to provide the exceptions. So over here, as you can see on the screen, we are trying to handle an exception over here. So how we can define an exception? So over here, we are defining an exception using do, and then you have the $2 and then the begin statement. So after the begin statement, what we are trying to do is, we are in this particular scenario, what we are doing is we are inserting a duplicate record or a duplicate key inside our table. So how are we doing that? Insert into employees. So we have an employees table, and inside that employees table, we have 2 columns, employee ID and name, and we are inserting values. So what are those values? One is the employee ID and the name is John Doe. So since this record is already present in the table, like whenever we are inserting a duplicate record or a duplicate key inside a table, we have to raise an exception. And how do we define the exception? We are writing the keyword exception and what is the required action once you encounter that exception. So once you encounter any duplicate record or a duplicate key inside a particular table, so what you have to do is it is violating our unique violation. So the constant of unique key or the unique records is violated over here since we are inserting a duplicate record. So what you have to do is you have to raise notice or raise message like duplicate key error. So once you get this error on the screen or the CLI terminal in Postgres, so the user will automatically understand that this is a duplicate record and they will appropriately do whatever is required in that particular case. So once you have this raise notice like duplicate key error, you have to end the exception, and you like in this particular first statement you had $2 marks, and at the end of the exception also you have the $2 symbols. Okay, so this is how you define an exception is in Postgres. The next question over here is explain the concept of JSON data types in Postgres. So guys, Postgres supports different types of data types, and one such data type is JSON. So JSON is basically JavaScript object notation data, and with Postgres you can store and query the JSON data type as well. So this is basically a semi-structured data, and with JSON you can use JSON or JSONB types, where JSONB is a binary format that is more efficient for indexing purpose. So for example, as you can see on the screen, here we are writing a query, and in this particular query we are using the JSON data type. So basically guys, JSON data type, like you can, so guys, data type basically it's a semi-structured data type, and it works in the pair of key value. So over here, as you can see on the screen, create table products. So we are creating a table products where the first column will be ID, which is a serial primary key, and the second column is the details. So the details we are providing in the JSON binary format. So once we create this table, the table will be created, and now while inserting values in this particular table, what we are doing is we are using the insert query, like insert into products, which is our table, details, and we are providing the details in the products table, like we are providing the values. So in details column, what we are providing name and price. So in the products table, we have the details. The detail will be name, which is the key, and what is the value, like colon, key, colon, value, comma, key, colon, value. So what are the details that we are providing for this particular column? So we are providing name as laptop and price as 1200. So using this insert into product details values, we are providing details such as name and price. The next question is, what does write ahead logging do? So write ahead logging, or WL val, is a method used by Postgres in order to ensure the data integrity and durability. So basically, val works by recording changes to the database in a log file before they are applied to the actual data files. And now, why you must use val? So basically, using val, the Postgres can recover from crashes. Postgres can also support data replication using val, and finally, Postgres ensures durability with the help of val or write ahead logging. The next question is, what is the role of vacuum in Postgres? So basically in Postgres, vacuum is a crucial process for managing and reclaiming the disk space which has been occupied by deleted or outdated data. Vacuum is essential for maintaining the performance and the efficiency of Postgres database, especially in scenarios with frequent updates and deletes. And now there are two tasks that vacuum performs in PostgreSQL. The first task is that of freeing up the disk space. So when the data is updated or deleted in Postgres, it is not immediately removed from the disk. Instead, what happens is it becomes marked as reusable by future inserts. So basically, the vacuum process identifies these reusable data pages and makes the space available for future use. And the second task that can be accomplished using vacuum is updating the statistics. So vacuum analyzes the distribution of data and updates the statistics used by the query planner. So accurate statistics help the Postgres choose optimal query plans, and this results in the improved performance of Postgres. The next question is, how do you use advisory logs in Postgres? So guys, advisory logs are nothing but user defined logs, and that allow the coordination between the database sessions. So unlike the row level logs, advisory logs do not conflict with the other types of logs, and they can easily be acquired and released voluntarily. So basically, to acquire an advisory log, what you can do is you can use the pg advisory log function. So how do you do that? You can write select PG advisory lock and you have to provide the log ID. Similarly, to release an advisory lock, you can use the PG advisory unlock function. So how do you do that? You can simply write select PG advisory unlock and you have to provide the lock ID over here. So advisory locks are often used for application level synchronization or to implement custom concurrency control mechanisms. The next question is, how do you use the PG bouncer connection pooler with Postgres? So to understand how do you use the PG bouncer connection pooler with Postgres, let's quickly understand the definition of PG bouncer. So PG bouncer acts as the middle layer between the application and the PostgreSQL server, managing a pool of database connections. So it handles connections requests from multiple clients and it uses idle connections and provides more efficient use of database resources. So by using PG bouncer, what you can do is you can achieve connection pooling, load balancing, and this helps to improve the scalability and performance of your application when interacting with a PostgreSQL database. And now if you talk about how to use the PG bouncer connection pooler, so over here, what you have to do is you have to first install and configure PG bouncer on a separate server or a machine. After that, the second step is you have to edit the pgbouncer.ini configuration file to specify the PostgreSQL servers that you want to connect to and the pool mode, which can be either transaction or session and other relevant settings. The third step is to start the PG bouncer service. And finally, you have to modify your application database connection settings to use the PG bouncer server instead of directly connecting to PostgreSQL. The next question is, what is the difference between a clustered index and a non-clustered index in Postgres? So the important difference between a clustered and a non-clustered index in Postgres is that clustered index is an index type that is used to store tables or the table data rows according to their key values. The next question is, what are the three phenomena that must be prevented between concurrent transactions in PostgreSQL? So there are three levels of transaction isolation that are used in SQL standard regarding three phenomena that must be prevented between concurrent transactions in Postgres. So these three unwanted phenomena are, as you can see on the screen, the first one is a dirty read. So a transaction is called a dirty read when it reads the data written by concurrent uncommitted transaction. The second unwanted phenomena is non-repeatable read. So this specifies a transaction that rereads the data it has previously read and then finds another transaction that has already modified that particular read. And the third type of unwanted phenomenon over here is the phantom read. So phantom read basically specifies a transaction that re-executes a query, returning a set of rows that satisfy a search condition and then finds out that the set of rows satisfying the condition has changed due to another recently committed transaction. The next question is, what do you understand by an inverted file in Postgres? So in Postgres, an inverted file is an index data structure that is used to map the content to its location to a database within a document or in sets of documents. So it generally includes the distinct words found in a text and a list containing occurrences of a word in the text. So it is used in a data structure for document retrieval systems to provide the full text search. The next question is, what is the purpose of pgstat SSL view in Postgres? So the pgstat SSL view in Postgres, basically it provides the information about the current SSL or TLS connections established within the server. So it displays or highlights statistics related to the encryption and the security parameters of these particular connections. So this particular view includes details such as the process ID of the connected session, the connection's SSL or the TLS version, the cipher suite that is being currently used, and the SSL or TLS compression status and other relevant information. The next question is, what is a hot standby in Postgres and how does it work? So hot standby in Postgres is a feature that allows you to run a read-only queries on a replicated database while it is replicating data from the primary database. So basically this setup provides high availability by allowing the replica to be used for query processing and thus offloading some of the workloads from the primary database. So hot standby works in conjunction with streaming replication, where the replica continuously receives val records from the primary database. In case of event of the failure of the primary, the replica can be promoted to take over as the new primary, minimizing the downtime. The next question is, how do we implement table partitioning? So guys, table partitioning will allow you to split the large table into small portions, which can be manageable pieces known as partitions. So every partition stores the subset of the data as per the specified partitioning key. So now to implement the table partitioning, there are a few steps that we must follow. So the first step over here is you have to create the parent table with all of the required columns, including the partitioning key. Once we have that, the second step is you have to create the child table that will be inherited from the parent table. So every child table represents a particular partition of the parent table. The third step is you have to define the constraints on every child table for limiting the partitioning key values. And last but not the least, you have to create the indexes on the child tables for optimizing the query performance. The partitioning features of Postgres offers automatic routing of data to proper portions as per the partitioning key, and this leads to simplified data management and enhanced query performance. So at the end of the day, why do we implement partitioning? Basically, it leads to simplified data management and enhanced query performance. The next question is, how do we implement sharding? So guys, sharding basically refers to the horizontal partitioning data throughout the multiple shards or servers for distributing the load and scaling the database system. So there are a few steps that we must follow in order to implement sharding or the horizontal partitioning. The first step is you have to set up the shard server. So what do you mean by that? So here you have to create the individual Postgres clusters or the instances for every shard. So every shard must have its own server like storage, processing and memory. The second step is to determine the shard strategy. So here you have to select a strategy to partition the data through the multiple shards that you have. So the strategies could be like hash based sharding, range based sharding, or a combination of both. The third step is you have to implement the application logic. So here you have to modify the application code and use a middleware to route the data and queries to the proper shard as per the data distribution rules. And once you have implemented the application logic, the fourth step is to define the data distribution rules. So here you have to determine how to distribute the data throughout the shards as per the selected sharding strategy. And last but not the least, you have to manage the data synchronization and consistency. So in the fifth step, you have to implement mechanisms for ensuring data consistency throughout the shards like logical replication, data synchronization, and distributed transaction tools. So guys, with this, we have come to the end of this session on PostgreSQL Server interview questions. So in this particular video, we have covered roughly 60 questions and we have divided them into three categories like beginners, intermediate, and advanced. I hope you have understood each and every question that we have discussed in this particular video. If at all you have any doubts or queries related to this session, then you can write them in the comment section and we will try to resolve your queries as early as possible. So guys, thank you so much for being with us and I wish you all the very best for your upcoming Postgres interview.